So when it first comes on, you'll get this notice. It says you have to use RTK. If you hit the X, it won't let you tile. Then it'll also give you this one that says you've read the owner's manual or been trained. If you hit the X, it won't let you tile. So you got to hit the check mark on both of those.
So if you accidentally hit it, you have to just restart the system.
Yep. So, and if it sees this module, you'll get both of those warnings. If you don't get those warnings when you turn it on, it's not seeing this.
Got it.
So probably what's happened is it's not plugged in at the hitch.
Okay.
But to make
Is this the screen that pops up?
No. So the very first time it pops up, you'll get this screen. Actually, you'll get a screen that pops up and tells you like to set up your screen. So it'll ask you like what time zone, if you want to name the screen, that type of stuff.
Got it.
But after you do that, it'll bring you to here. So you'll go to setup. This will be empty, but you'll do on this configuration, you'll do plus. And then if you're going to actually install tile, it has to be tiling. If you want to make a configuration where you can just go out and record elevations and don't need the plow, then you can do surveying. But even then, I still usually set it up as tiling.
Okay, because it'll still give you the option to survey.
Yep. Then it'll say select vehicle. I have vehicles in here, but the first time it won't, so you hit the plus. And then you just pick, like on this case, we would say maybe a front wheel steer, let's say John Deere, and then pick whatever model it actually is. So let's say like 8270R. And then on these, if it's a 3-point plow, you have to check this and put in a number. And what this is the distance from, it says rear axle, but it means fixed axle. So like on a regular tractor, it'd be the back axle to the hitch.
Okay.
On an articulated, it's actually the front axle. And then on a tractor, it's the center of the tracks, because it's where it's pivoting from when it steers.
Got it.
And the reason it needs this is that way if you have curves, when it's doing its guidance around the curve, it actually does that for you. Like it models, like, so if I want my plow to be here, the tractor's actually going to drive a little bit farther past on the guidance,
right,
in order to keep the plow on target.
Got it.
So, but you just put in a number, whatever the number is here. So we'll just say 3 feet. Then these antenna offsets are where the GPS is mounted on the tractor. And so these are defaults for that specific tractor.
Got it.
Because they have it pre-programmed. But if say you have your GPS at the back for some reason, you can come in here and move it to say 40 inches behind the axle, which would actually put it past the hitch. But so you can say behind and say maybe 10 inches. And what all this is just for if you're wanting to do guidance with the plow as well. If you're not doing guidance, you don't have to mess with these. So if they're not going to have a GPS on the plow as well that's hooked into or tractor, then you don't need to do that.
Got it.
But it makes you go through that step, and then you can name it. So we've got that vehicle, and then we got to make a plow. So you'd hit the plus, and you would say, like I always just do, SMX, and then whether it's a pull type, CD48, you can name it whatever. It's like, let's say ZD1600. And then how are we attaching it? If we didn't check that lift arms earlier, you wouldn't get an option here.
Got it.
So you tell it lift arms, and then on the controller, you would just hit the plus and it's going to come up and find this. I don't want to hit it for this because it'll mess up for the rest of it.
Okay.
You can see I've got a bunch of different ones in here. Then this is the hardest part, is getting these numbers right. So when they first hook the plow up, it's not going to be pitched all the way up like they need it to. And so getting these numbers right, you really need to be able to pitch it beforehand, but you can't pitch it right now without going out and manually pressing it.
Right.
and we can't go on until there's a number in there. So I always just go through and put in 1 on the pull types, or on the 3 points for those top 3.
What about for a pull type?
On a pull type, as long as it's pitched all the way up, then you can go ahead and get these measurements.
Got it.
So antenna to hitch is with that GPS arm up there. It's just horizontally from the hitch of the plow to where the antenna's sitting. Antenna height from ground is, I always go from that plate. I just go to the bottom of the plate to the ground. And then antenna to plow base is from the bottom of that plate to the bottom of the plow. And so on pull types, once I have this number, I just subtract 12, because it's usually, that's, with these tires and everything, that's the difference, is 12 inches.
Okay.
On a 3 point, how you would do this is you would have your plow pick, for this one here and this one here, I set the plow down so the shank is flat on the ground, and then I measure my antenna to hitch and my antenna to plow base, and then I pick it up and pitch it all the way up to get this number.
Got it.
So that's why I put 1s in here for these, because it's not going to be sitting right on a 3 point model. But I put 1s, it comes up with a name. It's got my implement now. It's asking for a speed source. It's going to always use the GPS from the water management. So if it doesn't have the GPS go to the water management, you can't tile anyway.
Right.
And then it's got a suggested name for the configuration, which is just the tractor name and the implement name. And then that brings you here. So now in this controller settings, this verify control, we can actually pitch the plow up and down. So we turn on the hydraulics, hold up, and it'll pitch it up. So we can pitch it how we want it from here. And then we can come back to this offsets, and then we can put the real numbers in.
Got it.
On a pull type, typically you don't have to do that, because that's already, you were able to do that before.
So for the people at home, when you go back to the verify control, if you're pressing up and it goes down, is that an issue? Can someone change that on the
plow? So depending on how you have the hydraulics running into the plow, if you're going the correct way and your cables are hooked up the correct way, then this should be set to standard. But if, say, you have it hooked up and it goes the wrong way, if you press up and it goes down, you can just switch it to reversed if you want. The big thing on the 3 points don't really matter, but on the pull types, if the hydraulics aren't going the right way, the wheels won't work.
Got it.
So on the pull types, what I do first is I turn my hydraulics on and make sure the wheels work. And if the wheels work but the shank goes down when I press up, then I switch my polarity. Or you can come up here and switch these plugs around from the harness from the Intellislope, because they say A and B on here, but I don't even look at it normally. I just plug it in, and then because I can switch it up there if I need to.
See what happens.
And all these tell you kind of what they're looking for. On this one, pretty much all I do here is just make sure up is up and down is down. Then this hydraulics check, it tells you what it's getting ready to do. But what it's going to do is it's going to try to pitch the plow up, try to pitch the plow down, and when it's making sure that it's doing 2 things. It's saying, how much oil do I have to send to get it to move? And then, did it move the right way? So actually, if you don't do this one and you hit that and it goes opposite of what it thinks it should, it'll change that one for you.
Okay.
But yeah, it's going to move on its own as soon as you hit the check mark. So make sure your hydraulics are on. And
will it give you an idea if you don't have enough oil per minute?
No, because what it's going to do is, if it's, say you're lower on oil, these numbers here, these up and down thresholds, it's going to, if you don't have enough, it's going to adjust these for you.
Got it.
So defaults for these are actually like 25 and 18, I think.
Okay.
But on the smaller plows, we lower them down on the 1200s, and this was on a 1200 last, so
okay,
that's why these are where they're at. Same thing with look ahead distance on a big plow. So 16, 3-point, or a pull type. This is going to be 66.9 inches. On the 1200 and ZD48s, we need to lower this to 44 because it's based off of the length of the bottom of the plow and being able to adjust to get on target fast enough.
Got it. So you said the up valve and down valve thresholds will adjust if you don't have enough.
They should, yes.
Okay.
And you may end up having to adjust these after the fact anyway, because once you do this hydraulics check, you're going to do this roll, and it tells you over here that essentially you're going to park the plow, you're going to hit set roll, and you're going to turn around and face the opposite direction. And if it's a pull type, you want to get the plow tires back in the same spot. If it's a 3-point, you want to get the tractor tires back in the same spot.
Got it.
But then after you turn around, you hit set roll, you turn around, you hit set roll again, and then you're done with that, and it'll tell you what your roll percent is. But then you come in here to calibrate pitch, and this is where you're actually going to put it in the ground. So you want to have 811 called or utilities marked. It tells you here, you're going to manually put the plow in the ground 30 to 40 inches. So what I do is I have my chain out, and then I just pitch the plow down till the tip of that chain's just touching the ground, and that's about 30 inches. And then we start driving, we hit start, and then we're going to manually move that up or down to get it where that chain is staying about the same depth. And then once we hit start, it can't hit it now because I don't have GPS.
Right.
It's going to ask you for a grade, and so you just have to kind of guess what you think the slope is. So the more even the grade you can have, I mean, it doesn't have to be flat, but you don't want it doing this. So the more even the grade, the faster it'll calibrate, because once you type it in and hit OK, the less you have to adjust it manually, the faster it'll calibrate.
Got it.
And this would say not calibrated. And so once you've hit start and typed in your grade and you start moving, it doesn't really give you any progress or indication. What'll happen is eventually it'll switch to calibrated.
Okay.
If you run out of distance, like say you get to the end of the field and you just can't go any farther, you can hit stop, pitch it up out, go back down to the other end, move over 10 feet, and do the same thing until it's done. So if you don't have to mess with it much, usually 300-400 feet it'll calibrate.
Okay.
But I've had it before where it took 3,000 or 4,000 feet to calibrate. And then I only had like 500 feet to work with, so I went 500 feet, came back, went 500 feet, came back, and then finally it calibrated. But the ground we were calibrating on was like this.
Oh.
So, but once it says calibrated, you hit the back arrow, then all these should be set, because what you're setting with that one is this pitch 0. And then this pitch 0, you can see there's a suggested calibration here as well. Every time you do an auto tile run and in the field after this, when you're actually using it, this number here will update. So if you go from a ground that's got a lot of clay in it, this might say 1,000. But then you go to some sandier ground and the plow's going to be running a little bit lower in that sandier ground. You might be running along and it might be an inch or two low from where it wants to be. Well, this number is actually going to be a lower number typically if it's doing that. So then you can just come in here after you've done an auto tile run, hit set as pitch 0, and now your plow's going to move up to where it should be for those next runs. It really only happens when you change soil types drastically.
Okay.
So what I always tell people is, so I've everything's calibrated. I've done this field, and I'm getting ready to move to a new field. I would do a run with no pipe and just see how it's pulling. So if it's pulling right on target, then we're good. If it's too high or too low, we can come in, look at this number, hit set as pitch 0, and then try it again, and it should be right back there on 0.
So you would set as pitch 0 and then do another dry run?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I always do that until it's running good. Normally, like a lot of times I pull into a field, I do it, and it's right on target, I don't have to mess with it. But sometimes I'll pull in and it's running, say, 1.5 inches too high. So then I come in here, I go 300 feet when I'm doing it, because you have to go that far to get a good number. So if I went 300 feet and it was 1.5 inches too high the whole time, then I update this. I hit set as pitch 0.
And how are you knowing if it's running 1 inch or 2 high?
So on your run screen, it's not gonna let me. So on your run screen, after you hit start, this would have a vertical light bar, and it would say target or where you're at compared to where it wants to be. So if it's in the middle and the line's green and it says 0.0 or close to that, then you know you're good. But if it's constantly hovering high, it'll be like in the yellow. And if say it's constantly somewhere closer to 1.5 inches, like it might bounce from 1.7 to 1.3, but if it's constantly somewhere higher than that, then that's when you would come in, and you can do it from this screen to these bars, settings, configuration settings, controller settings, and then you can hit set as pitch 0.
Got it.
But that's really the only thing. Once it's calibrated, that's the only thing you'll ever really have to mess with.
Okay.
Now, when you're doing your calibration, if you're going along and it just seems like the plow's kind of doing this a lot, like real aggressive, I would just go ahead and hit stop, come back into here, and lower these numbers.
Okay.
So like I said, I think they're going to be 25 default, and those work good on the big plows. But on the little plow, we need to lower this. And so come in, lower it till it's smoother, and it'll take, once you've done enough of them, you'll be able to just kind of feel it and say it's too aggressive. But on the little plows, we usually end up lowering those down. I typically start at 18 on the little one. This one's 15 because the last tractor it was on had a lot more hydraulics. So.
And you said you'll notice that during when you do
when you do this calibrate pitch. Yep. And actually, I can notice it when I do this, just because I've done it long enough. So when I do this verify control and I press up or down, I can usually tell by how fast it goes up or down if I'm going to need to lower that or not.
Got it.
So, yeah. And then this start compensation is 2%. What that is when you're lowering in the hole and you hit auto level, it's actually going to go to that number. So it's not going to sit in the hole at 0%. It's not going to be level. It's going to be whatever this says. And then same thing when you get ready to take off, if your average grade, if the grade it's calling for that first 10 feet is less than this, it's actually going to do this for the first 10 feet. And the reason it does that is when you take off, especially with tires, that plow loads up, the tractor loads up, and the tires want to squat, so the plow might want to do this. That 2% makes sure that it doesn't put an actual dip in your pipe.
Got it.
If it's calling for more than that, then it'll do whatever it's calling for. But if it's less than that, it's just going to do that for the first 10 feet.
Is that anything you have to adjust yourself?
So this is what we default it to, because this is where we're confident it won't put a dip. Some people don't like it to be that much, so they might lower it down to say 1%. And so what that's going to do is when they set down, it's actually going to point down an extra percent of grade. And same thing when they take off, it's not going to come up as much if it's really flat.
Got it.
So where people might lower this is they have an existing main that's not very deep, and they got really long runs on really flat ground. They might lower this a little bit just so it doesn't come up too much when they come out of the hole.
Got it.
So,
Sweet.
But this is why this and then just everything else is why I always tell people, if you're putting your own mains in, put them a foot deeper than you think you need them. That way your main's always deep enough, as long as you can, based off the ditches or whatever. But
right.
The deeper the main, the less issues you'll have down the road with being able to hook things onto it. So.
Because even in the recommended, after you do a survey, I know you personally always try and get the plow lower than what it usually says.
Yep.
Into the hole.
Yeah. So. So like here's our design screen. It'll never be shallower than this to the bottom of the pipe, never be deeper than that, and it's going to try to be that. It'll never have less slope than this 0.1%. And it might not tell me here. Yeah, because I don't have GPS. But it would tell me right down here, minimum starting depth.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, based off of the way this run looks, that minimum starting depth is going to tell me 26 because this is a consistent slope. Now, if I had, say, a dip right out here, instead of 26, if I've got, say, a 6-inch dip here, it's probably going to tell me I have to be 32 to start. But whatever that number is that it tells me, if my hole is deeper than that, say it's telling me 30 and my hole's 36, I'm probably going to go down to like at least 34 just to make sure that I'm plenty below this minimum depth. So that way it can come up to grade. That way it's falling. Because the more it falls at the end, the more average slope you have, the more water it can take away. So, and the difference in, so say this one was just 100 feet long and this falls 1 foot, that's 1% slope. Now, say instead of being like right here the whole time, I come down an extra foot at the exit. Well, now I've gained 2 feet of fall, so now I've doubled my slope, so I've almost doubled what it can carry.
Got it.
So, and that's all we did was we didn't have to go, we didn't do anything other than just start out deeper when we started to gain that extra drainage capacity.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Nice.